Tonight, decision demand. The Devils push for a final call on where to build their high-performance centre. Hello, I'm Guy Stayner. This is ABC News. Also tonight, severe flooding kills close to 100 people in Spain, while Australians are warned to expect an increase in weather disasters due to climate change. And the press has rolled to a stop for the circular Head Chronicle. The Tasmania Devils are urging the state government to make a decision on where to build the team's new high-performance facility. Exploratory work on both the Rosny and Kingborough sites is now finished, and the clock is ticking towards Tasmania's entry into the AFL.
Reports, analysis and investigations into a new Devils High Performance Centre are officially complete. All that remains is a final decision from government on which site the new facility will be built.
We're at a point now where we feel the information is complete and it's time to take that next step and make the decision and make the announcement.
It's down to the club's preferred location at Rosny Parklands or its second choice, Kingborough, different sites but with the same criteria.
So that's everything from geotech, and that's the rock that sits under the grass or under the turf, through to environment, heritage.
Architecture firm Opus has won a more than $2 million design tender for the facility, but just where the government chooses to build it is now anybody's guess.
It's still under investigation and still being looked at, and when that decision has been made, we'll certainly be letting you know.
Builds at both sites are believed to be more than the budgeted $70 million, meaning bang for buck will be crucial.
We should have been already started by now, and in fact the contract says that they should have had the approvals 6 months ago. They should be starting construction now.
And the longer the wait, the higher the price.
Timing is obviously a critical one, and with timing comes cost, as I think we would all appreciate.
As the Devils' entry draws closer, North Melbourne's exit from Tasmania is happening quicker than anticipated. The Roos were contracted to play 4 games here in Hobart next year, but they'll now take 2 of those games to Western Australia instead. The beleaguered TT line is set to save hundreds of thousands in sponsorship costs. The remaining 2 Hobart Kangaroos fixtures also likely to feature higher profile opposition.
The focus should be on getting the right teams that are going to bring a big crowd and set Hobart alight. That's what I think everyone would like to see.
Chris Rowbottom, ABC News.
At least 95 people have been killed in the worst flooding disaster to hit Spain in decades. Torrential rain battered the eastern region of Valencia, gushing through streets, uprooting trees and sweeping away buildings. Europe correspondent Catherine Diss reports from Spain.
From the air, rescue crews scour a sea of mud for signs of life. This woman and her dog winched to safety just in time as floodwaters rapidly rise. Some clamber to rooftops to escape the torrent, hoping they'll be spotted. Cars and trucks no match for the wall of water. More than 400 millimetres of rain fell on parts of southeastern Spain in just a few hours on Tuesday, turning streets into gushing rivers. Large swathes of the region remain underwater. In darkness, rescuers started the hunt by boat and car. But the sheer scale of the disaster wouldn't become clear until morning.
Never before in history has there been so much rain. You can't even imagine the amount of rain that fell here yesterday.
It's a catastrophe. The floods we had in 1982 were a joke compared to what happened here yesterday.
The government has declared 3 days of mourning and warned the natural disaster isn't over yet.
The whole of Spain is crying with all of you. Our absolute priority is to help you.
But amid the heartbreak, tales of human survival are emerging. This elderly couple in their late 80s were remarkably found unhurt in the rubble. Such stories will boost morale in a region with tested resolve. But with many now questioning if the warnings came too late, grief and hope could quickly turn to anger. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Spain.
Australia has been warned to expect an increase in weather disasters because of climate change, according to a major new report. It's found the world is only years away from breaching the Paris Climate Agreement. Here's ABC meteorologist Tom Saunders.
Temperatures are rising at an increasing pace. That's according to the latest biannual State of the Climate report from the Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO. It found Australia has now warmed 1.5 degrees since pre-industrial times, and that's leading to multiple impacts.
More extreme heat events, including heat waves and marine heat waves. We've seen a reduction in rainfall in the cooler months of the year across southern Australia and an increase in rainfall in the warmer months of the year.
And since Australia is warming faster than the global average, when the Paris target is breached in the coming decades, our temperatures will already be 2 degrees higher. While a 2-degree global increase would equate to a near 3-degree warming over Australia. And with hotter temperatures comes a more intense fire season, already up to 25 more dangerous fire days per year. We face more frequent droughts, although short-lived heavy rain is also increasing, raising the threat of urban flooding.
For each degree of global warming that we experience, the atmosphere can hold about 7% more water vapour.
But more than 90% of the extra heat is being absorbed by the oceans. Australia's seas are simmering at 1.08 degrees above pre-industrial times, and warmer seas are combining with melting ice sheets to raise sea levels up to 5 centimetres per decade along the New South Wales coast. According to climate scientists, the severity of future warming and impacts is solely dependent on emissions. And while the burning of fossil fuels has levelled off over the past decade, the report says the world is a long way from reducing greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere.
Tom Saunders there. The parents of an 11-year-old boy killed in a horror crash at a Melbourne primary school have spoken for the first time, sharing an emotional tribute to their son. Jack Davey died after a car ploughed through a fence at Auburn South Primary. His father says he was a shooting star who blessed his family with love.
Clinging together after an unthinkable loss, the parents of Jack Davey today struggled to voice their grief.
Words can't adequately describe the utter devastation we feel as we come to terms with the sudden, overwhelming loss of our Jack.
The 11-year-old was killed when a driver performing a U-turn crashed through the fence of Auburn Primary School on Tuesday, hitting him and 4 other children who were seated at a table. The driver has been released while investigations continue.
He is our champion. He is our beloved son and brother who remains very much alive in our hearts and memories.
A keen basketball, soccer and futsal player, Jack's death has sparked an outpouring of grief from the community.
We find comfort in reading the many messages and memories of Jack and how his life and energy was a positive influence on so many in the community at just 11 years old.
Also a comfort, the first responders, paramedics and doctors who fought to save Jack's life.
Our heartfelt thanks to Millie, the Auburn South school receptionist, and the former emergency department nurse who stayed with Jack, providing comfort the entire time. Our words are inadequate.
2 of the injured children have now been discharged from hospital, while 2 others remain in stable condition.
We wish them all the support to assist in their healing in the weeks and the months ahead.
A GoFundMe account for the Davey family has so far raised more than $175,000, and support is being offered to the community, with the local council and Red Cross today opening a temporary hub for anyone in need of help coming to terms with a life cut short. Leanne Wong, ABC News, Melbourne.
The political heat over free flight upgrades and lounge club membership blew back on the opposition today, with Peter Dutton forced to clarify a claim he'd never called mining magnate Gina Rinehart to request access to her private jet. Mr Dutton now admits his office did inquire about whether the plane was available before accepting a free ride, but the Prime Minister also had to issue a clarification of his own.
The Prime Minister hoped he'd reached the end of a turbulent week, but even after denying he'd ever called Alan Joyce seeking an upgrade, questions remained.
Do you know whether he had other communications with Alan Joyce?
Why is he kind of like Slim Shady on this issue?
Well, he's not Slim Shady at all, Carl. He's declared all of these flights.
The Prime Minister's office then confirming he didn't request free upgrades from anyone at Qantas via any form of communication.
We find out this morning that the Prime Minister's clarified the clarifying statement.
But delving into the Prime Minister's decade of declarations has opened a can of worms across the Parliament.
The Liberals have been holding themselves out to be pretty pure and pretty holier than thou, but then it turns out they've got problems.
2 years ago, Peter Dutton flew on billionaire Gina Rinehart's private jet to attend this Bali bombing memorial. It was declared, but on Tuesday came under question.
Have you ever personally asked Gina Rinehart to fly around Australia?
No.
Today,
the cheaper option for the taxpayer was for my office to speak to Mrs Rinehart's office as to whether the plane might be available.
And opposition transport spokesperson Bridget McKenzie first claimed she'd never accepted an upgrade, then admitted she'd received one. Now she's asked the major airlines to check if there's more.
As soon as I understand the nature of the discrepancies, if there are any, then I will be updating my declaration.
Parliamentarians across the chamber have long lists of declarations: free concert tickets, sporting games, travel and dinners. Part of the job? Perhaps, but also a window into who has their ear. Some are now questioning whether an independent examination of perks for politicians is needed, and possibly an overhaul of the rules. Evelyn Manfield, ABC News, Canberra.
A Tasmanian fisherman says he's considering whether to close his business because he can't regularly get his truck onto the Spirit of Tasmania. Two bigger and better Spirits that can fit more caravans and oversized vehicles can't start operating in Tasmania until early 2027 because no berth has been built. The delay means businesses and tourists have struggled to book the current ships for their preferred dates. Labor has been lobbying for extra day sailings and says the 20 announced for April, September and October aren't enough. Fisherman Jacob Chambers transports live fish to the mainland on his truck and says not being able to book on the Spirits is making it tough to stay afloat financially.
There's sort of no point catching the fish because you can't sell the fish because you can't take them to the mainland. And if I sell them in Tasmania, it's a lot lower price. And I've got lots of overhead, so I've got to get the top dollar for them.
Optus is being sued by the consumer watchdog over allegations of shocking sales conduct towards First Nations and other vulnerable customers. The ACCC claims people were sold products they didn't need and couldn't afford, and then some were chased by debt collectors.
Tony Cork has uncovered allegations that Optus sold phones to First Nations customers who lived in areas with no network coverage.
I find that pretty outrageous that they were selling products and plans to people for phones that weren't going to work as soon as they got back home.
Now the regulator is suing Optus in the federal court.
We allege that Optus sales staff manipulated credit checks in order to oversell phones and plans to vulnerable consumers, and that they did so without undertaking coverage checks. In some cases, Optus then pursued debt collection activities.
The watchdog alleges Optus engaged in unconscionable conduct against about 430 customers, mostly in Darwin and Mount Isa in Queensland.
Many of these consumers were facing learning difficulties, were unemployed or financially dependent.
This is degrading at the highest level as I see it, you know, for people living with disability, but more important for our First Nations people.
It follows a case where Telstra was fined $50 million for targeting more than 100 Indigenous customers. This case will examine the role of Optus management.
We allege that Optus management in the sales, in effect, reporting levels, including senior management, became aware of the conduct and of the failures in the systems, but allowed the conduct to continue.
Optus has apologised. It's sacked or disciplined the staff involved, is repaying affected customers and is cooperating with the ACCC. Michael Atkin, ABC News.
After 118 years, a weekly newspaper dedicated to the state's far northwest is set to be mothballed. The closure of the circular Head Chronicle has left the community wondering what will fill the local news void.
After more than a century, the loss of their local weekly paper has left Smithton residents reeling.
It's just going to be sad. It's just another local business that's gone and another closed shop.
Every bit of information on the local sporting and news in our area, it still meant so much to people in Circular Head.
In a post on Facebook, the Circular Head Chronicle announced this week's would be the last edition. Les Shearer owned the paper from 1975 to 1999 and was shocked by the news.
I was quite devastated because I knew of the impact that it was going to have on the local community.
He said the paper was beloved during his time.
If our staff hadn't delivered piles of newspapers down to the local news agency by 3 o'clock, we would start getting phone calls.
Circular Head historian Patrick Bakes said the region's history was written on the pages of the Chronicle and nowhere else.
So you'd find out everything, who was going to a party, who'd been sick, who'd broken a leg, who killed a snake, like everything was there.
Many blame social media for the demise of local papers, and Mr Bakes says it may be left to pick up the scraps.
There'll be all sorts of things that will happen here that unless someone puts it maybe on Facebook or somewhere else, it just won't be remembered.
No other publisher has put their hands up to buy the newspaper, and the current owner will only say that Wednesday's edition will be the last. For now, it seems the Chronicle's final pages have been sent to print. Sandy Powell, ABC News, Smithton.
Lebanon's Prime Minister says he's hopeful a ceasefire deal can be reached between Israel and Hezbollah, which could lead to a 60-day pause in fighting. Israel has launched heavy airstrikes on Baalbek in southern Lebanon as it expands its attacks on what it claims are Hezbollah strongholds. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 19 people have been killed, with the Israeli military ordering the entire city to evacuate. The escalation comes as the White House sends officials to Israel for talks amid reports of a draft ceasefire plan put forward by Washington.
We want to get to the point where we have a ceasefire and a diplomatic resolution. We are not calling for one right now. What we are trying to do is structure such a diplomatic resolution with all of the relevant parties.
US Vice President Kamala Harris has spent the day trying to distance herself from remarks made by Joe Biden. The president has been accused of referring to Trump supporters as garbage, the same language a comedian used to describe Puerto Rico at a Trump event on the weekend. Now it's been seized on by the Republicans, with Donald Trump donning high vis to dump on the controversial comment.
Making a point with the help of a giant new prop.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honour of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Donald Trump drawing more attention to an own goal by the Democrats.
The crooked Joe Biden finally said what he and Kamala really think of our supporters. He called them garbage. No way. No way.
The president's off-the-cuff remark was in response to a comment made at a Donald Trump rally, where a comedian described the US territory of Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable.
Joe Biden argues he was referring to the comedian's rhetoric, but his vice president was forced to try to limit the fallout.
Let me be clear, I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for.
It's a new headache for Kamala Harris's campaign, especially as she tries to woo more Republicans like Justin Warren, who's decided to switch sides at this election.
That was a terrible statement. I'm not going to try to explain why he would say that. It could have been a slip or a gaffe on his part. That's wrong.
Whether or not this latest controversy ends up having a meaningful impact on the campaign remains to be seen. But for the Vice President, it risks undermining her message to voters that she's the candidate who'd unite Americans.
Joe Biden's comments are being compared to Hillary Clinton's infamous description of Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables.
He says garbage. I take offence to that.
A message being driven home in the final days of the campaign. Jade McMillan, ABC News, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Back home, and a bill to create a body that will deal with complaints against judges has passed Tasmania's upper house with amendments. The Judicial Commission's bill was created after Supreme Court Judge Gregory Geeson was charged with assault and emotional abuse. He's since been found guilty of those charges. Judicial commissions will be able to assess complaints and make recommendations to Parliament about whether a judge or magistrate should be permanently removed from office. The bill also allows for the immediate suspension of judicial officers who are charged with an offence carrying a prison term of more than 12 months. The government says it'll consider the amendments when the bill returns to the lower house. Patients are raising concerns about a lack of informed consent over the nation's most popular osteoporosis drug. They say not enough of them are being adequately informed of side effects or complications when coming off the drug.
Margaret Rhines had osteonecrosis of the jaw for 2 years, a painful condition that involves the death of bone cells due to decreased blood flow.
The pain will come on suddenly and it's so severe, all you want to do is go and lie down.
It's a side effect of the osteoporosis medication she was taking, but her specialist hadn't warned her. Osteoporosis reduces bone mass and density, making them fragile. Prolia, or denosumab, works by blocking cells that cause the bone loss. It's given by injection every 6 months, but a late or skip dose can make symptoms return, sometimes worse than before.
There is a small but significant risk of multiple spine fractures in patients who stop Prolia without any further preventative measures.
He co-authored a report finding most patients weren't offered those preventative measures. Some patients say it's an ongoing issue, and the advice gap means they weren't able to give informed consent.
We're just being told the side effects are rare, you can stop taking it any time, my mother is on it, if you don't take it, you will break a hip and die.
I think it's very important that anyone who prescribes or de-prescribes a drug for a patient has this conversation with them.
Patients want the regulator to add a black box warning to Prolia, something that's already happened in the US. But it and the drug's manufacturer Amgen say warnings are already listed on the product information leaflet. The RACGP insists Prolia is safe and effective and warns injury from osteoporosis can be deadly. Penny Timms, ABC News.
Shareholder activists have failed in their bid to stop Woolworths sourcing farmed salmon from the last known refuge of an endangered Tasmanian marine species. Protesters gathered outside the company's annual general meeting in Sydney today, where shareholders were asked to vote on a resolution to no longer procure salmon from Macquarie Harbour. The harbour is home to the endangered Maugean skate. Scientists say salmon farming is the main contributor to the degradation of the skate's habitat. But Woolworths says more research is needed before it acts on the concerns of environmentalists.
Woolworths should not be part of causing an extinction, and the shareholders should vote to protect the Maugean skate and protect Tasmania's beautiful and unique environment.
The AGM is not the place for a scientific debate on that. We are not the experts. So for that reason, we are supportive of the federal government's reviews that are currently underway.
To finance now, and the local share market fell again today, but the Australian dollar recovered a little. Here's Alan Kohler.
Coles released its first quarter sales today, not quite as woebegone as Woolies was yesterday, so while both stocks fell today, Woolworths fell more. JB Hi-Fi also produced its first quarter today, and it was a ripper. Mineral Resources attracted some spirited bidding, and Telga Group, the little Aussie company developing a graphite mine in North Sweden, had a big win in the Swedish Supreme Court, which threw out an appeal from environmentalists. Telga's share price popped 43%. The oil price increased 1.8%, while iron ore and gold increased a little and silver fell. The Aussie dollar crept back to 65.7 US cents. And European markets fell after September quarter economic growth in the Eurozone was 0.4% and only 0.2% for Germany. The share price of Donald Trump's social media company, Trump Media and Technology Group, fell 22% last night. It had quadrupled in a month up to yesterday because of people using it to bet that Trump would win the election. No one's got any idea why it fell last night, but it's still well ahead. The other thing being used to bet on Donald Trump has been Bitcoin, which didn't fall last night, and it's still at a record high. And this is a graph of a financial indicator that glories in the name of the euphoria meter. It combines market valuation based on price-earnings ratio, volatility, and investor sentiment surveys. The euphoria meter is at a record high. And finally, also at a record high, the proportion of Americans planning to holiday abroad, otherwise known as the Get Me Out of Here index. And that's finance.
Cricket Australia has extended the contract of national men's test coach Andrew McDonald. His main challenge will be to renew the test team, with several big-name players due to retire in the coming years. Today, 3 of the potential opening batting hopefuls came undone as Australia A took on India A in a crucial audition in Mackay.
On the day Andrew McDonald's job was locked in until 2027...
We're more looking forward, I suppose, with the challenges ahead of us.
It was the future of ageing test stars like Steve Smith, Usman Khawaja and Mitch Starc that was the major talking point.
I think if you get the selections right on the back of players exiting, then the transition is a lot smoother.
So all eyes were on the action 2,000 kilometres to the north as Australia A took the field against India A, and it was the bowlers who starred. South Australian speedster Jordan Buckingham started the party with his first ball.
Down leg side. Has Philippi taken it? He has.
The wickets tumbled after lunch, with Brendan Doggett a standout.
Hard struck in front and out. Doggett has 5.
He later took a 6th before Fergus O'Neill wrapped up India A's innings for just 107, which set up the bat-off for Australia's vacant opening spot. New South Wales 19-year-old Sam Constas was given the first chance to push his test claims, but lasted just 3 balls.
Edged and out, so Constas is gone.
Cameron Bancroft's horror start to the season continued, out controversially for another duck.
Top of the thigh pad, absolutely.
Victorian hopeful Marcus Harris fell for just 17.
It's a poor shot from Harris.
It was left to captain and another test aspirant, Nathan McSweeney, to make a stand, scoring a patient 29 not out off 110 balls as the home side finished the day on 4 for 99. With 2 centuries already this season, he may have provided the selectors with the one answer they were looking for. David Mark, ABC News.
To the weather, and tonight's photo from a beach near Denali is from Kathy Tai, and the patterns on the sand almost look like parquetry flooring. Launceston and Devonport topped the state with 21 degrees today. It reached 19 in Burnie and St Helens. Cooler southwesterly winds kept Hobart to just 17. Marrawar had 11 millimetres of rain overnight. 3 fell in Hobart and Strawn. The satellite image shows speckled cloud approaching Tasmania from the southwest and a very large cloud mass south of WA. Tomorrow will remain in a southwesterly airstream as this high moves closer to the state. At this stage, the large cold front is expected to arrive on Sunday. Across the country tomorrow, showers in Sydney and Darwin, possible storms in Brisbane, fine in Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth. Back home, there'll be showers mainly about the west and northeast, clearing in the evening with snow falling to around 800 metres about the south during the morning. The showers in the west and far south are more likely in the early morning with falls less than 5 millimetres. There's a medium chance of isolated showers about the east, southeast and Midlands. Staying fine though across the north and northwest. Launceston a top of 19 after a low of 6, up to 17 degrees in Devonport and Smithton. Burnie 16, just 13 in Queenstown. Showers further east. Any falls, though, should be light. 18 degrees in St Helens, Swansea 17, 12 in Oatlands. And Hobart's heading for another cool day. Any rain should be less than a millimetre, a top of 15 after a low of 8. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 7 minutes to 6. On coastal waters, there'll be west to southwesterly winds of 15 to 25 knots, reaching up to 30 knots about the north and the southeast. There are strong wind warnings for the central north, east of Flinders Island, and from Wineglass Bay to Low Rocky Point. There's a bushwalkers alert for the Western District, and there's also a sheep graziers alert for the southeast. Saturday will be fine and partly cloudy with patchy inland frost. Sunday there'll be showers about the west extending statewide during the morning, and it will be mostly fine to start next week before the chance of showers increases again on Wednesday. And that's it for this evening's program. Up next is Sarah Ferguson with 7:30. See you tomorrow.